Hey all, so how do we go from this into this? I'm going to have a little video here and show you how I make my open spiral pieces. Started off just by taking a piece of wood and making a rough shape. I'm just using my bowl gouge here. This is a piece of beech I have. It has really cool spalting in it. It's about 12 inches long, be about 3 inches at the diameter when I'm done roughing it out. So it's actually a pretty simple shape. It just starts pretty fat down here and gets a little bit thinner up there. You can kind of make it any direction you want, any dimension you want. But I wanted to stop and just see if the spalting carried through, and look at that. That is beautiful. Now I'm going to have to work around this little knot piece if I keep with this piece. I do have another piece to try, but I really like the coloring on this piece. So the next step is to sand it a little smooth. Doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. And then I'm going to go ahead and make my spiral. And keeping this in mind, this is the part I actually want to cut out. So I'll make a spiral around it. And then I'm going to hollow it out and then cut out the spiral. Here's the setup of how I core out the inside. I don't core it completely out because it's kind of a sloped thing and I don't have any hollowing tools that are long enough to go the whole way down. So I really focus on just getting a good core at the top and then taking that same size the whole way down. And then I'll use the cut-saw rasps to go ahead and smooth out the inside and get rid of the extra. I'll do a little bit of hollowing with some tools. I think my tools will go probably maybe about that far, so half the way. So what I do is I drill a pilot hole first. I set up a drill bit here, set a pilot hole, then I just use different size Forstner bits, and then I slowly go through, and this is the opening that I want. It's about, I'd say, less than 1/4 of an inch, and that's what I like to see at the top. And then I'll keep it a little bit thicker the whole way down, and it might be just under 1/2 inch at the bottom, the thickness at the very bottom. So I core it out probably about to here, and then I go ahead and finish the rest with rasps. But I'm going to show you how to make this spiral layout. I have a Jet 1236 lathe. It has an index with 12 holes in it. Some lathes have more, some have less. You can even make your own index wheel. There's videos on YouTube how to do it. I'm not going to explain how to do it now. Where you can set up as many points as you want on your index. I'm just going to use a 12. I'm going to put my index pin into the first hole. Use my tool rest. I'm going to pull down on the wood so it's consistent. And then just make a line as straight as I can along the wood. And that's just going to be a reference point. I just want to make sure I can see the line. And if not, I'll go over it twice. If the lines aren't exact, that's okay, because this is not really an exact thing. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it and do one, and then do the second one, pull down on it and do another line. And I'm going to go ahead and skip the next one and then do the second hole again, and again pull down. So I'm going to have a fairly consistent pattern across using every 2 holes. If I wanted to, I can go back. If I think the spirals are going to be too big, go back and do every one instead of every 2. Last time I did this, I kind of liked the every 2, but again, I could do every one if I wanted to. This is about 10.5 inches, so we're going to start from there. We'll say 10 inches. So what I'm going to do is about every inch, I'm going to go ahead and put a line. And again, this is not exact, so you're going to be working on the exactness of it as you carve everything out. This is just really a guide. And again, you don't have to do every inch. I just happen to like this combination where I do every 2 and then 1 inch going across. For this size, when I do wands, my wands are about 14 inches long. I'll do every 1/2 inch, and then I'll do every I think every 3 of these, so I'll have 4 spirals going up. Play around with it and see what works for you. One thing I'm going to suggest is making these lines a little bit bigger, because we're going to turn the lathe on and we're going to put these lines the whole way across, and that you'll see how we get the reference point. So I didn't show a video of how I actually do the spirals, but I drew the spirals on it, and then I used a rotary tool and just cut the spiral out that I did not want. And we're going to be using these new cut-saw rasps. I really like them. We're going to use them to go ahead and shape the outside and inside of the piece. And it's kind of like using rough sandpaper, but you have a lot better control on it. They're pretty aggressive, which I really like. And they remove a lot of wood very quickly. And the nice thing I like about them is you have total control over how you use it. I normally use 2 hands when I'm doing it, but in this case the piece is very fragile. I don't want to snap it, so I'm just using one hand to hold on to the piece and then the other hand to go ahead and use the rasp. But as you can see here, it is removing a lot of wood in a very quick process, so it saves a lot of time. These rasps have quickly become one of my favorite pieces in the workshop to use when I'm carving pieces. I'm just going to speed this up a little bit because you guys don't need to sit through another 40 minutes of me carving the outside profile of this piece. But even in the sped up process, you can see how quickly it's removing this wood. And the nice thing is there's no tear out. I don't have to worry about wood being torn out or using a burr on the outside and the burr slipping and causing a big cut down the middle of the outside of the piece. Just wanted to show here on the tip where there's hardly any wood, there's no worry about chipping or tear out or anything. Even when there's a very small amount of wood that you have to use, these rasps, even though they're aggressive, they do a great job here. Now I am going to switch over to these burrs. Picked up a couple burr kits, and I'm going to use them to finalize the inside and then thin out the walls. The walls at the top right now are just under 1/4 of an inch. They're about 1/2 of an inch thick on the way toward the bottom. And what I'm doing is, as you can tell, I'm removing a lot of material very quickly. And what I'm looking for now is I'm just trying to get a uniform thickness. I'm trying to go for under 1/4 of an inch. This piece will actually end up at about 1/16 of an inch. And I'm just making my way down using these coarse bits, and they are removing a lot of material very quickly. Here's an example where there's a large piece of wood, and you can see how quick it's going and eating through that wood. The one thing I really like about these burrs as compared to other burrs, the way these burrs are made, they don't leave tool marks, which is really cool. Some of the other burrs are very consistent on how they lay out their material, and when you're using it, you can actually see tool marks when you're done. I found so far using these burrs While it does leave some tool marks, they're not as noticeable as the other products that are out there. And that's why I really like to use these burrs. This was the part of the piece that I was most worried about, was where the wall and the base come together. There has to be a nice smooth curve or else it looks kind of weird. So nice thing is with these burrs, I'm able to go ahead and rough out very quickly again a lot of wood and make that smooth transition. As you can see here now, you can see some of the roughness on the inside. What I'm doing is I'm looking for final thickness. Are there pieces that are a little bit higher than others? Are there rough spots that I missed? Here I am using the fine rasp on the inside, starting to finalize the thickness of the piece. I am holding the piece because, as you can tell, it's very fragile. You can see it moving around. Speed up the process here a little bit so you can see what I do. I just make my way right down using two different rasps depending on how thick it is right now and how thin I want to make it. And without really measuring, it's all done kind of by eye and by hand. With the walls being so thin, I did have to use my hands to balance the piece. What I'm doing right now is I'm looking for high spots with my fingers, just marking which places I need to go and see how fragile the piece is, just moving around as I'm turning the piece. Trying to be careful not just touching the top of the piece and spinning it, because I think it'll put too much torque on it and will almost snap the piece. As you can see here, I'm using the fine rasp and the piece is really moving around as I'm doing this, so I'm being very careful not to snap it. And I'm just refining the walls, getting it down to that uniform thickness, or as uniform as I can get. Even though these rasps do a really great job, and there aren't a lot of tool marks, I did go through and do the final sanding. I still have to sand the outside and get rid of all the pencil marks from doing my spirals as well. Sanding actually put a lot more pressure on this piece than the rasps did, which I was surprised. So I'm doing a lot of one-handed sanding, making sure I balance the piece and not snap the piece and put too much weight on one curve or another. Then I'm starting to do the outside, getting rid of all the pencil marks, and I'm going through my grits. I'm doing 120, 150, 180, and then final of a 220. On this piece specifically, there's some voids, there's some ant holes or bug holes. So I'm just going through removing all the old wood that the bugs left, trying to just clean it up a little bit so when I put the finish on, you don't have this weird spot on the outside that looks different than the rest. For the finish of this piece, I just decided to go with a pure lacquer finish. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of coats of lacquer. I would normally use like a Waterlox or another tongue oil finish, but I didn't want to darken the wood. I wanted to make sure that you still see the contrast between the light wood and the dark wood, and you see all the spalting. And lacquer will do that. So it's a fast drying. It dries in like 15 minutes, so I can put a couple of coats on very quickly. And there you have it. That's the final piece. It's about 12 inches long, 3 inches at the base, and the whole thickness of the walls, except for the base, is about 1/16 of an inch. It's closer to about 1/4 of an inch near the very bottom of the base, and then the base itself is maybe, it's under 1/2 of an inch thick. So it's a very light piece, and I hope you guys really enjoyed. Good luck and happy turning.